Make your next vacation unforgettable. On Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Star of the Seas, it's everything you've loved about every family vacation you've ever been on, with mind-blowing thrills at the largest water park at sea, 7 onboard pools for every level of chill, more than 40 ways to dine and drink, and even more to enjoy at our award-winning private island, Perfect Day at Coco Cay. This is the new Star of the Seas. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Once there was a way to get back home.
I don't think you are on it. It didn't sound like you are.
Who was playing bass?
Doesn't sound like anybody's on it.
It wasn't you, was it?
Well, unless it was overdubbed.
Well, why would you ever double take one? To get back home.
Because he was playing the piano.
Sleep pretty dark. You playing bass? Do not Who's playing piano?
I think I'm playing piano.
So who was playing bass?
He is.
I think I'll
You can't play at
overdubbed
the
it.
same time.
He overdubbed it.
Can you
You
overdub
can
it?
hear the sound of it. It's like direct inject.
But you did many takes. Take 17. Just take it.
He was keen.
Overdub bass.
Maybe
Okay.
I played bass. I played bass on some with that 6-string Fender.
Sounds like it.
It was definitely Paul playing piano, so it couldn't have been.
Well,
him
you
playing bass.
you should be able to tell because
Shall we?
you know how
Hold on a
you
moment.
would have done it.
There's lots of false starts and breakdowns. That was take one.
So
we end up at
are you
take.
saying the bass couldn't have been overdubbed because it's on every take?
It was live,
Okay, well then it must have been me or John playing it.
obviously. You can't remember.
Maybe.
Could have been Ringo.
Well, look,
Charlie Hayden.
we had a 6-string bass, a right-handed bass,
yeah.
so that for these kind of conditions.
Hello and welcome to episode 305 of Something About the Beatles podcast. You, the listeners, have let me know I've got a broad enough audience that there are people who like insider accounts, there are people who love the analysis of the Beatles, there are people who love the musical shows, and we've done quite a number of them, most notably the ones with musicologist Walter Everett, Jack Petrocelli, and Cameron Greider of the RPM School. We've done a few of those. Well, here's something new that I wanted to get into. It's sort of a Venn diagram overlap between the musicianship shows I've done with the RPM guys, as well as some of the studio stuff I've done with Jerry Hammack, most notably, co-author of the new book Ribbons of Rust. So this is an analysis of who is playing what on Beatle recordings, an issue that I think there's a certain segment of the sappy listenership that's very interested in that, but it's something that I think gives some insights into how the Beatles worked. So there is value there. And my two guests today both hail from Australia. Both of them are musicians, and one's name has come up on the show before, one of the RPM shows, Marcus Phelan, a musician with a YouTube channel you guys should check out. It will be linked in the show description. He's been doing this stuff for years. He's played in Beatle tribute bands. And Andrew Shakespeare. Both these guys are musicians. Both are wonderful Beatles scholars in terms of really researching this stuff and getting into the nitty-gritty. So you've got Marcus's YouTube channel and Andrew, who has been floating the idea of writing a book. And I hope that he does, because if nothing else, it'd be wonderful to see the book out there, Shakespeare on the Beatles. And then maybe another Australian could do a companion volume, The Beatles on Shakespeare. That would be Duncan Driver. I'd love to see that. But we came together with a list of songs that we felt there's been so much speculation about who is playing what on these songs. And I will say that the waters have been muddied by people in a position of authority who have put things out there that end up, upon closer examination, ringing false. This is everybody from Kevin Howlett to Jeff Emmerich, a guy who, I will say it again on this show, his book to me, Here, There, and Everywhere, is utterly valueless in terms of using it as a research tool. Yes, he was there, but as we've depicted on the show a number of times, sometimes the people who were there make the worst witnesses, and that includes the four Beatles themselves, in terms of saying things we know to be demonstrably false. empirically false. And in this post-Aaron Webber world, we demand more in terms of analysis of the data. We all make errors. Every one of us does, even me. And we try to do our best with the data we've got. So we offer this show as a sort of analysis as the best data we've got by people who know what's what into coming up with answers with this stuff. And the beauty of it is, you may not see this as beauty, but to my way of thinking, it's a great illustration of showing that even with the sharpest minds at work, sometimes you can come up with two compelling arguments that are not in alignment. And you will hear some of that in this show. People whose Beatle intellect I highly value, that come up with equally strong arguments that are on opposite sides, which leads to the conclusion that as much as we hate it, as much as we resist it, sometimes there are things that are just unknowable. And we'll say so. And that's, I think, the best you can do. In my book or anybody's book, if we don't know something, we should say it and not come down with a conclusion that, oh yeah, this is it. Because you don't know 100% of the time. You can try your best, and that's what we do here. So I hope this will be the first of other such conversations with these two guys going forward, analyzing contentious credits.
Even primary sources, allegedly, like the George Martin ghost-written book, Summer of Love, The Making of Sgt. Pepper's. I used that as my first port of call when I was trying to do a video. I did a video on fixing a hole. And knowing what we know now with outtakes and isolated tracks, reading it, the chapter on fixing a hole, is fiction, total fiction. Nothing matches up. And it's really written away like, George Martin, I was so proud. I'm actually going to play keyboards on a Beatles record, gushing kind of language and that sort of thing.
I was just going to add something. When Revolution in the Head came out, and it was immediately hailed as, this is the book we've been waiting for, this is the classic. But at the same time, another book came out by somebody, an author I can't remember, but it was called A Day in the Life. And it was a very similar book. It was about the same size, and it basically went through song by song, but they did it in a kind of an album format. So they'd bring up an album and then sort of go through songs and give editorials on the songs and whatever. And I found that information to be a lot more accurate and a lot less pompous.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the departed, but there was a real arrogance, old school rock critique arrogance about the way Ian MacDonald wrote about their music,
100%.
Deciding what was their good music and what was it not their good music. But the other thing is just that whole thing of, printing credits as fact and then people adopting that tome as the go-to book around critique of the Beatles and then swallowing it all as fact. And I suppose in the years since that book's come out with the net and Facebook and, I don't know, all the social media stuff, it becomes harder and harder to kind of convince people that what they have long thought is not correct.
100%.
I think that's one of the interesting phenomena, and maybe one of the reasons we're doing this is that, people stick to their side of the story and get really quite upset if you suggest what they've always thought is actually incorrect. Mm. Whereas I think there's a lot of us in Beatle land who absolutely relish finding out that we were wrong about something. And finding out something new is like a very exciting thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, in the last week I've spent quite a bit of time listening to isolated stuff on YouTube in preparation for this, and it's been really exciting. Somebody just released an isolated track thing of Revolution number 9. It's 45 minutes long, and wow, what a listen.
Mm-hmm.
It is truly
right.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
And that's the thing about books like that written back in the 90s, Ian MacDonald, he didn't have access to what we have access to now. And I think the bar has really risen on the scholarship, and people aren't satisfied with parroting stuff that may or may not be true just because it came out of a source that wasn't properly vetted, like Here, There, and Everywhere. And certainly Ian MacDonald, I don't think he was even a musician, but he writes with this authority and, as you say, arrogance that my word is law. And if I say it, it is settled law now. And of course, we know better.
Yeah.
So people quite often in the various resources, people state things as fact. But what you really don't know is what they're basing that statement on. So they don't sort of provide the evidence for this being stated as a fact. They just say this is a fact.
Even with access to tapes, you can still get it wrong if you don't know how to read the tape box or studio log. If you can misinterpret, which is the classic case for Giles. Anyway, I listened to his interview, or an interview, where he did the, like John played bass on that song.
Yeah.
He claimed it. But it was so confused. I was listening to it and like, he's contradicting himself. First saying it was an overdub, but then saying, Paul is on piano and organ at the same time. Because you look at the tape box that says track 3, piano and organ.
Yeah.
But then you say, John has something to do, so maybe he played bass, and no, it's not. It's an overdub, and Paul couldn't have played the organ and the piano at the same time. You need 4 hands. And listen to the outtakes. It's always the organ comes in on the basic track, just on the bridge. That's all. So it's like John's been told it's John playing the organ, and it's being told you can play on the bridge, but that's it. And George overdubbed more organ, all the high pitch sort of stuff. But yeah, you can have the tape and access to the 8 tracks or whatever. But if you don't know how it's been laid down,
right,
what is an overdub and what isn't, you can give the wrong information as well.
Or what's a punch in?
Yes. People say, they've got access to the tapes, and not really. They've probably got the digital, using the digital tracks as what we all use, and wouldn't have the actual reels to remix. It'd all be digitized without actually hearing dialogue. And you don't hear dialogue for overdubs anyway. If you're doing a bass overdub, you're not going to hear John's voice or Paul's voice. So you just got to use your ear and your kind of knowledge. And I've got magazine interviews where George, in 2 interviews, specifically talks about Paul's bass overdub on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. If George says it twice, he must remember it pretty well. So
Giles said John did the R's in A Day in the Life.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. We've settled that one on this show, so we'll move on. We're going to start with the list that we came up between the 3 of us, and some being more controversial than others. But the first one was one that was kind of on my radar because I'd remembered reading long time ago, this being pre the kind of data and scholarship that we have now, that George had missed the session for Every Little Thing during the Beatles for Sale sessions, and that John had played all the guitar on it. And I thought that was kind of curious, if so. And so we'd been discussing that between us. Andrew, you'd found an interview that Paul had done in 1964, close to the time of the sessions.
Yes.
Where he actually describes that song in detail, the recording of it, because it was Every Little Thing was a song that he had sort of earmarked as a potential single, therefore it was important. And so there is 12-string guitar on it. We know that 12-string guitar was George's baby that year, starting with his birthday and the coming home from the trip to North America. But in fact, we have plenty of reason to believe that it's John playing the lead on that song and George playing acoustic for Paul's interview.
Well, okay, so with this particular song, I've read so many sources. So Every Little Thing's probably the first of their songs where it just feels there's a lot of disagreement or people are uncertain about what happened. And, and unpacking it over the last few weeks and, going through it with Marcus, I think we've come to some kind of agreement about this. The first controversy is, I remember years ago reading somebody saying, this is one of the rare examples of John singing lead on a Paul song. And I just thought, really? Don't know about that. So, I listened closely and thought, no, I can hear Paul. And it turns out that there was only ever one vocal track recorded. And it's 2 people at one microphone singing in unison in the verses and then splitting into harmony for the choruses, which is something that John and Paul had done quite a bit, mostly in 1963. The singles A and B sides. So if you know that there's only one vocal track and there's 2 voices on it, then you know that it's John and Paul in unison. So, but John's voice is admittedly a little more dominant, just like it is in 8 Days a Week, which is recording.
Exactly. Yes. It cuts through.
I have theories about that. It could be just as simple as John being a little closer to the mic, but also, John was vocally on fire in 1964. He was probably at the peak of his early Beatles prowess as just a soulful shouter. He was amazing. So maybe his voice just came across as being stronger than Paul's during that particular take. But either way, it is John and Paul.
I remember the first time I was lonely without her. Can't stop thinking about her now. Every little thing she does for me, yeah. And you know the things she does for me, boo.
It's not John doing lead on a Paul song. That's just not the case. And then the second thing is really about the guitars. Now, Paul, in 1964, at the time of the recording or shortly after, said in an interview that George played acoustic and John played the lead. So I know that Paul, his memory can be a bit faulty in these latter days, and that there's a couple of examples like Come Together and She Said, where clearly he hasn't remembered it right, because we now have the audio evidence to support the fact that he has not got it right. And we'll get into those at some other point, I suppose. But in this case, he said it very, very close to the recording. So I think this is a case where you just need to take his word for it.
Not only that, we have photos of the session. We're showing John and Paul together playing guitars. Paul's playing John's 325 upside down just for that part. And John does the sort of thing, 12 string. There's pictures of it, both do together. So,
and just on the surface, it doesn't sound like George's 12-string sound.
No, it's slightly, it's more like a semi-acoustic sort of sound, not so electrically sort of. But yeah, I've got pics of it, and it's sort of novel, because you see Paul playing the guitar upside down, but he's only playing the one string, so it's just doing. And at the end, he's going kind of like jumping every little thing or whatever. So. Yeah, so it's great. I mean, recently, just this last week, someone sent me some photographs from the session and go, oh, there it is.
And those are the session photos that you see part of the group where you see Ringo at the timpani.
Yes.
Which he also plays on that track.
And Paul on the piano. It got pictures of Ringo on timpani, Paul on piano doing the dun, 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 whatever sort of a descending B minor thing. And the dun, dun kind of thing. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
It seems logical to do the parts that sort of together, because you're da-dum, on the same track. So, yeah.
So if you go through an unpacking exercise, and I think what we've come up with is that track one is clearly bass, drums, and acoustic guitar, and that's Paul, George, and recorded simultaneously was the vocal. So they all four were there at that point. Then it would seem that maybe George wasn't present, because the timpani, piano, and 12-string photos, I don't remember George being in those. Marcus, you might differ, but I don't think so.
Oh, I think he'd be around the session, yeah, because he was there for the backing track. But John's doing that sort of thing at the same time on the same track as he's doing the solo. So
that's right. So that takes care of two tracks. You've only got two tracks left, and the next one is the guitars. Now, we can quite clearly hear, as you've pointed out, that there are two guitars playing simultaneously on that track. So therefore, the next track is the two guitar overdubs, simultaneously Paul and John. We have the photos to prove that. And then the last overdub, we've got photographic evidence, as you say. It's Paul and Ringo simultaneously recording the timpani and piano. And yet, I have seen sources saying it's George Martin on piano. That's stated as fact, but who knows? So I think it's this thing of like unpacking things using a mixture of evidence and facts, probability and logic. You have to kind of use all of those to come to some kind of conclusion that rings true. So I think, working on this over the last week or so, that's certainly what feels right to me. Do I have absolute 100% proof? Well, no, but I think about as close as you can get to it, really.
I think it's a lot more solid than what we've been told thus far, especially with the addition of the photographic evidence to the data we've got. I feel we're on pretty solid ground, unless something else turns up, but I feel pretty comfortable with that.
It's a fairly straightforward, this song. I think it's the most straightforward of the.
For sure.
It's only 4 tracks to deal with.
And yet it's just 4 tracks. It's simple. It was done quite quickly. And yet there's a lot of misinformation out there about just this song.
You know that George was part of it because in the Get Back movie, he specifically mentions the song like as something to cover because he's every little thing. He was trying to remember how they play the chords, whatever. So
I tell you which is a good one. Jogging beside oh, those kind of songs. Yeah, well, we'll do it.
yeah, so he liked that one.
Yes.
So he was there.
That's a really good point. And it reminds me of an anthology when they're at Friar Park and he's on the uke and he starts playing I Will, which he's not on in the studio recording. He wasn't at that session, but boy, he was a scholar of Beatles' own material, whether he was there or not.
Yeah, yeah.
At times.
He didn't know which album Golden Summers was on, though.
Right. There's that bit too.
And Paul Moxon says, George Harrison, great Beatles scholar. It's hilarious.
Right.
Yeah.
So next on our list is one that I have to say that has probably elicited a lot more controversy because it is so atypical in the Beatles canon as a recording that made you wonder how it passed through quality control that day and ended up on the finished record. And that is I'm Looking Through You. The final take, which was the third version taped, we know the one from Anthology, the first one with the hand claps on it and minus the bridge. There was a second one we've not heard in between. But one of the things that caught my attention years ago when I was doing research was I think the hardcore fans are aware of that website, What Goes On, that tracks the anomalies. And they had a great detailed account of the things you hear in the final recording of I'm Looking Through You. And they quote a guy named David Ferry, not the David Ferry, but a different one. And I'll read from it. What he had to say was, my main argument surrounds the recording of the Rubber Soul track, I'm Looking Through You, possibly one of the messiest recordings the Beatles made. It is rushed, terribly recorded, and not particularly played well. Thus, I have a theory. I believe, contrary to all of the reports, including Lewison and MacDonald, that this could be a solo Paul recording. After all, it was his song and quite a personal subject for him. The drumming is awful, with a noticeable rim shot being missed, no bass drum, notes here, untrue, it's there, flumping away, or hats and cymbals. Sounds like the old patting the knees percussion to me, recorded on top of a snare to keep time. The guitars sound out of tune and sound like Paul's style of play, especially at the end. George was always a more organized guitarist, and I can't see him committing this to tape when the Beatles were at their height. The guitar sound is also Paul, maybe his Epiphone Casino. The tambourine work is poor also, and the organ stabs should have been heavily compressed. In fact, the best input is the acoustic capoed guitar, most audible at the start of the song. Whatever, it's a messy recording, especially when compared to other Rubber Soul tracks, which are well played and nicely produced. I don't have the date at hand when it was recorded, but I'm guessing it was one of the last songs recorded for the album. It was. I do know, however, that Paul had been the main part of the song for some time. Was it dusted down, quickly recorded to complete the album? So we can enumerate the issues with this. In the U.S., you had that false start at the beginning that's not on the other versions, the one I grew up on, which I thought was fabulous. We've got miss snare drum parts, drop tambourine, feedback throughout. What is going on with this track?
Okay, I think it's not capo. I think it's sped up.
Oh.
I'm looking through you. Where did you go?
Oh yeah, it's just that sort of thing where they, thought, it's a bit slow. I don't think people really capos at first fret. It's not a Beatley thing. I don't think so. Anyway, it's not a.
But Very Speed is.
Yeah, it's just be like My take on it, I listened to the isolated tracks and there's proper drums on it. It's a boom, 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 boom kind of thing. And to me, okay, it's Paul on guitar, acoustic guitar. It's George on bass. So they must have had a bass, even though they didn't have the basses we know. right until 65. But they must have had some access to bass. I mean, the Beatles. Listening to the isolated bass track. It doesn't sound Paul. It works, but it's basic. It's kind of thing. Like you just feel like, oh, Paul would throw in some kind of nice little thing, but it's very utilitarian or whatever. It's just following the tonic or whatever the bass note of just being simple. And I think George played the lead. I'm not sure, but
did you have a theory on why something so unbelievably loose, especially compared to the rest of the production on an album, slipped through?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, maybe they struggled with the song. I mean, we had all different versions. Finally, come up with a version and patching it together.
Dylan-esque.
Maybe it was rushed. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a solo thing. I think it's a bit silly. Yeah, I don't think they were really doing solo things, especially a band type thing. It's just maybe it's just a rough mix. It's got what matches or something like that in it, kind of percussive. So they were experimenting, doing silly things too.
Right.
And I think that's just like a home recording. Some things just weren't muted or whatever. They're just a bit out of place, but the overall feel, yeah. So I think it's overblown, the thing about this being a disaster. Like, if you go into this one sort of particular thing, you can really make things sound worse than they are. Yeah, I just listen to it and think, oh, I'm enjoying this. It's like wasn't sure whether I liked the song.
It's a great track.
Yeah, and the guitar's great. So the thing, and it's Paul doing all the vocals. That's the thing. What's another thing? There's no other person doing any vocals. It's you don't sound different, but you must the low vocal. That's Paul.
I'm looking through you. Where did you go? I thought I knew you. What did I know? You don't look different, but you have changed. I'm looking through you. You're not the same.
So maybe he did a lot of it by himself. I don't know, but there's actually real drums on it. But I just for some reason it's matches or whatever louder than. Yeah, it's a strange mix, but it still sounds great to me. Yeah,
I think this is where we sort of have to bring in something else, which is the likelihood and also patterns. We know for Beatles for Sale, that was when they, and this has been part of the evolution of my listening, I suppose. Beatles for Sale was clearly the first time where they were really stuffing around or experimenting with arrangements and different kind of instruments just to add a bit of flavour. The first half of 65 is kind of characterised a bit. They still seem to be mainly using their basic lineup for basic tracks, but they start to put down 3 instruments instead of 4. And then George, like the Help title track, George will then overdub his guitar just so he can get it right. That first half of 65 is also characterised by Paul suddenly seizing the lead guitar and adding lead guitar to several songs, right? So, but then, like, I always kind of thought that Rubber Soul was the last of the sort of like full band performance on basic tracks albums. But when you look at it, that's actually really not the case. There's instruments missing all over the place. And you start to see the phenomenon of whatever instrument the person wrote the track on, more often than not, is what they play on the basic track. So that's kind of the new development for Rubber Soul. So I think there is a high probability that it's Paul playing the acoustic guitar on the song. I don't see John taking the time to kind of learn all those chords because it's a fairly, it moves through the chords quite quickly.
Everyone, George and John, they could easily play it.
They could, but I think there's.
But I think it's the songwriter usually is the one to get it down quickly.
So I think there's a very high, just like with I've Just Seen a Face from the previous album, which didn't have any bass at all. I think Paul probably wrote this on acoustic and played it on the basic track, and I would imagine it would be George who was on bass because I think it's too nimble for John, and Ringo's on drums. But there's also on that basic track is a tambourine. So we know that all 4 took part in it, but the likelihood is that it's probably John on tambourine. That's what I've come to. And then they didn't put the vocals on to last. So the next thing they put on was just one track of organ.
Doesn't Ringo play the organ?
Yes, Ringo plays the organ. Now, there are some very, very strange note choices in that organ playing, particularly at the end. He's hitting like this.
That's it.
That. It's totally nothing to do with the key that they're playing at all, but
it is.
They let it go.
It's a G and a C sharp D together, so it's you get the. It's like
it's particularly atonal.
It's sort of
it's particularly atonal.
But it's
at that time. And the guitar, I think it's probably George. But the interesting thing is, in the bridges, why, tell me why, treat me right, and it goes bam, bam, down, down. It's incredibly out of tune. It's incredibly flat. It sounds really cute but dorky.
I didn't notice that. I just think the riffs are great. It's a great riff.
Oh, I like those riffs. It's just the wah, wah in the bridges sound incredibly flat.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Well, tell me this. We mentioned earlier the possibility of the speed being altered on the acoustic guitar. If that was on the basic track, do you think they would have put the pitch where they wanted it and then overdubbed the instrument on top of that, adjusting to the tuning that was on the sped up acoustic track?
I know. I just think the vocals are definitely done in A flat. So I think they would have. I just think it sounds G, and I probably think, it's a bit slow. And
so I sped the whole track up.
Speed up the whole track and then do the vocals.
Okay.
Paul's easy to do that. I mean, he plays it live. When I was in the live last 20 years or whatever, he plays it in G, but he can't remember the intro. So he's going to play up in the 12th fret. And I can actually remember seeing a clip where I think I was trying to, one of the guitar players was trying to sort of show him where the play started off. And forgot completely, which is, it's really simple. It's up there, but A flat is just not rock and roll. But he's definitely singing it in A flat. So, because when you slow it down to G, I had to learn it. I've slowed it down to G, and the vocals do so a bit good. But I think it's George on bass, and that's what I thought last night. I was listening to it and going, it's just a bit clunky, slightly clunky. Confident, does his job. I wouldn't be surprised if George played bass on some other songs around that period as well, like We Can Work It Out. I've always sort of thought, sounds like Paul on guitar.
Maybe somebody can answer another little riddle. I've got a resource here, which I'm holding up.
Yeah, I can see.
This resource says that the organ, the lead guitar, and the percussion were all recorded on one track. Does anybody remember if the organ and percussion are played simultaneously on the track? Because apparently both are Ringo.
Yeah, well, it's easy to it's just probably at the same time guitar. I haven't listened to that properly, but it's 3 notes. You just got to do this ring.
Is the tambourine on the basic track?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe this is where the matchbox comes in, but then he couldn't be playing organ at the same time unless he's one-handing that and doing the matchbox with the other.
Well, yes, that's right. But also another thing is it has been referred to as a matchbox, but as various sources point out, it sounds exactly like a hand being slapped on the thigh rather than a tap on a matchbox. So who knows? Who knows? But I certainly don't believe the theory that it's all Paul. Absolutely, that's just not correct. Cute theory, but
for me, the biggest unanswered question is the lack of quality control. Where was George Martin when that was tracked?
Oh, maybe they're just in a rush. And
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love feedback.
Yeah. Did they have headphones in those days? When did they start using headphones? I don't think Rubber Soul. I think it was like Revolver when you first see pictures of them with headphones. They used to have monitors and something easy could feedback through doing the vocal.
George Martin was present for the taping of Don't Pass Me By, and it's got to be about the sloppiest recording they ever did. Let that one go through.
It's a white album, yeah. It's a white album.
They composed a majestic orchestral piece as a prelude to that track, which is very strange. But
anticipating Phil Spector's orchestration for Long and Winding Road.
Yes.
Which song are you talking about?
That thing called A Beginning, which was composed as an orchestral prelude to Pass Me By, which actually sounds more like an offcut from the B-side of Yellow Submarine.
Right.
Exactly right. And they did end up using it in the film, of course.
All right. Okay.
All right. If we've buried that one, we can move on to Fixing a Hole. 1967, recorded at Regent Studio because EMI was not available. It was a smaller facility, as I recall reading the description, not one that they would willingly spend a lot of time in if they didn't have to.
I guess just one thing I want to say about this, because really this is Marcus's passion, this song.
It's my song.
Marcus has spent a lot of time on this song, so I really respect that a lot. I think, once again, there's a probability thing here. Paul wrote this song on a keyboard. So it seems to me that it is very, very likely that he is playing first harpsichord part, because there are two, the first harpsichord part on the basic track. And it seems that it was probably John who played the bass on that basic track as well. And Ringo played drums. So that, and there's a guide vocal as well. That's the basic track.
The guide vocal is actually the vocal.
Oh,
that's the thing. It's interesting. It was mixed down to, I think, one track. So basic track is Paul on harpsichord, John on bass. This is definite. Ringo on drums, and I think George on maracas. To me, that's as far as George got. Got the quote somewhere where the quotes I found of George talking about this particular song, they're very derogatory. He's just putting shit on it. So it doesn't sound like someone who'd be proud of the stellar guitar work on it. And then actually in the vocal, Paul does a which is the guitar line. So I have the feeling that Paul knew exactly what he wanted on this song. The quote is, I could find it, what George speaking about, he's complaining about the recording sessions. Like, I bring my guitar and Paul saying, no, don't take it out of the case. And all I'd hear is, fixing a hole over and over again, fixing a hole over and over again, and then Paul come and overdub everything afterwards. So he actually said Paul would later overdub everything. So there was no guitar done on that in Regent. It was done all back at EMI. So, and actually when they took the tapes back to EMI, they thought this was unusable, too rough. I mean, the bass playing is really incredibly rough. It's quite comical sometimes, like, it's John. But so Paul did a great job. So they're going to check it out, and they actually started doing another version. They realized, we could fix up the original track, and Paul overdubbed the bass, doubled it up, and fixed it up with it sort of more defined. Boom, 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 boom. John would be just going boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So you did a good job. That's why it sounds like it's got reverb on it, and it's two basses together. So
wow, that's interesting.
Paul once was like, "Well, there's two reverb on it, but the two basses." And to me, the guitar is definitely Paul, because the week before he recorded the lead breaks for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the title song. And we know he did it on a guitar tuned down a whole step. And so a week later, he's doing Fixing a Hole. And the only way to play the guitar properly is tuned down a whole step. There's no other way of playing it properly. And I found out that lots of songs, quite a lot of songs, even from Rubber Soul onwards, Paul played his Casino tuned down a whole step. You could tune it up for certain songs, like Drive My Car to Solo, in that is tuned down a whole step. And just recently, someone, very good demonstrator on YouTube, on Sam Popkin, he did a Baby You're a Rich Man guitar demonstration, and he said it's played on a guitar tuned down a whole step, which to me indicates that Paul played guitar on that one as well. So there's quite a lot of songs tuned down the whole step, but Fixing a Hole, it's the only way to play it. And, I've proved it. So people, because we used to, like, people say, the drop D thing. It seems illogical to approach a song for guitar in F minor and think, okay, I'm going to do drop D for this. And it doesn't make sense. It makes the chorus guitars parts and the verse parts, it makes it more difficult when you do a drop D. I mean, it's good when you're playing live. Everyone does it playing live because you haven't got time to, no one's got sort of spirit guitars tuned down for one song or something. So you just do the drop D and you get this one E flat note in the solo. That's all it's for. If it wasn't for that one E flat note, people wouldn't tune down a D string. But it makes sense when you have the whole guitar tuned down. You know, you're not playing normally, playing an F note on the guitar. Anyway, that's my belief, and I think it's right.
So this is a tricky one because, like, if we go through sort of the track breakdown, I mean, I have a resource here that says that George Martin plays all the harpsichord.
Yeah,
John
well, it's probably from this book.
And Paul plays both basses, and that just doesn't ring true for me. So I can only say what really, I mean, we know that on the simultaneous recorded track there was harpsichord, maracas, drums, bass and vocals. We know Paul sang it. We know Ringo played drums. So then it's a question of who played what. I believe it's Paul on harpsichord because he wrote it on keyboards.
We've got the evidence. We have the evidence on the outtakes and the whole thing. That but if you read the George Martin book, The Summer of Love, I'll just read a bit of it. Like, Paul had decided to use a harpsichord as the mainstay of the rhythm. Even so, the bass line is more important than the harpsichord line. Paul had to play bass guitar on it because nobody or can play the instrument quite like him. That meant someone else was going to have to play keyboards. This was unusual because Paul always liked to play his own keyboards and his own compositions. The part of honorary standing keyboard player to the greatest group in the world was offered to me. It wasn't too difficult, and it didn't seem likely to tax my non-virtuoso technique too much. That's just complete bullshit.
Yes.
And it's not his voice. It's a ghostwritten book, and that's why the whole thing is like, it goes through detail about what you're going to say about which track and whatever, but it doesn't relate to, they said there's acoustic guitar on the vocal track. There's an acoustic guitar as well. There's no guitar there.
The question for me is, why does George Martin say he played on the song? And that is because he did, but he didn't play on the basic track. So when you come down to the very last track recorded, it's a simultaneous recording of harpsichord, so an extra harpsichord, which you can hear on the recording, a second bit of drums, and the doubled bass line. So you've got those three elements just on the one track. So, yes, Paul did play that second bass, absolutely.
The harpsichord is basically at the intro, the brong, brong, that's the intro. That's basically the overdub. Yeah. It's just on the...
So, yes. So
filling up the intro makes it more dramatic.
It seems very likely that George Martin did play some harpsichord on this.
Yes, he did. Yes, I'm saying he did.
Well, Paul was overdubbing the bass.
He's kind of saying that he played harpsichord on the whole thing, which he just did not.
It's just the intro. It's just the strengthening the intro and maybe some other parts. I'm not sure, but...
So if we go through track by track, it's like the first is harpsichord, maracas, drums, bass, vocals, right?
Yep.
The second one is the doubled vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is the lead guitar. I'm not sure whether I really should be giving my thoughts here to contradict what you believe, Marcus. Do you think that's appropriate, Robert?
To me, it's played on a casino.
Go ahead.
I know it sort of just muddies the waters again.
Like when you have a source like the George Martin thing, I can see that being repeated throughout every sort of so-called chronicle of it. Even in like Wilson's recording on the Beatles, he correctly says at first Paul's playing harpsichord and that's all. But then he says that there are other things. See, George Martin says that he played harpsichord on it, so he's always hedging his bet. But they always mention the guitar, and in the book, George says, it's a rather lengthy guitar solo, very loud, and the guitar solo is half the length of George's first guitar solo we hear on I Saw Her Standing There, which is 16 bars, I think. This is 8 bars. It's a short solo. But you go through all the Beatles Bible, everything, they're all talking about this long solo and, great long solo. And they're just paraphrasing this book. If you poison your primary source, it seeps into everything. And like, maybe it's just a little detail like lengthy solo and George played it really loud. But when you look at it properly, he's like, it's not long. It's 8 bars. It's very short. And it's constructed and it follows Paul's da, 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 da. And the way George spoke about, in other quotes, we've been talking about such, but he singles out fixing a hole. He just hates it. And it's like, wow, like, it's not a guy who would be proud of his wonderful guitar work on it. It's great guitar work. And it has to be played. This is 100% on a tuned down guitar. And Paul's guitar, the Casino, was tuned down at this period for a long period, even up till the Magic Mystery Tour. That's why I say it.
I'm just going to give my thoughts here. So that quote from George where he's talking about fixing a hole and where he's taking the guitar out of the case and Paul saying, no, put it back. What he actually says in that quote is that, you'd bring out your guitar and he'd say, no, put it back, we'll be doing that later, which means to me, to my reading.
But then he says, and then Paul will overdub everything. That's the final quote. So to me,
yes,
it's like, it's bitter.
Yes, it is bitter, and George was notoriously bitter after their breakup.
And things, George didn't play much guitar on Sgt. Pepper's. It was his gap year. He was into the sitar, as he says. He hardly played guitar at all, especially he played on John's songs for sure. He's there on the title track, Sgt. Pepper, but he's doing this kind of bendy kind of stuff. It's him and Paul doing the rhythm first. But it's Paul doing all the leads on those songs. And Paul complained, quote of saying, where's George? I didn't even know he wouldn't turn up to sessions, and I'd ring him up and he said, George, why aren't you here? He said, I'm painting the house. And this is fairly recent sort of quotes. And so, Paul's bitching about George not being there.
I suppose I can only really go on my feeling here. And yes, it is obviously the guitar is tuned down. I mean, the second to last note of the solo is lower than standard tuning. So yes, it is very clearly tuned down. I totally buy it.
It's one of those drone songs that Paul does. It's like Taxman. It drones on the open G string, which is the F note. So you hear it's like, da, da, da. It's a drone song. So it's very much in Paul's niche. Taxman and Good Morning. They're all got drone type things. This is one of those. It's in that category. That's what people don't get. It's kind of like, if you go to if it's a tuned down, so you're playing the G string and the D on the B string. And so people hear this low F note, and people say, some people we've done covers of it, so the F note is down. What are you doing with the left note? And they say, just add another guitar doing, but it doesn't work like that way. It's just one guitar. And yeah, it's Paul, 100% Paul to me. Anyway, to my opinion. Yeah.
For me, I feel that Paul's leads around this couple of years, and in fact,
he's the only one doing the leads around this time. That's the thing.
Well, for a lot of the Beatles' career, when Paul played lead, it was not in a particularly considered way. It was in a fairly spontaneous way, and just sort of like the Taxman solo was one take. It's like bang, done. After George, mucking around with it for hours. The only thing for me with fixing a hole, and the reason why I just can't totally accept that it's Paul, is because the part is so considered and so worked out and so perfectly executed, which is not really how Paul was playing at the time. He was doing quite exciting off-the-cuff sort of playing at that time, and it just feels like a George construction to me, but I can't be sure of that. That's just how I feel about it. The rest of it, I think we appear to have settled on, but that one remains an open question. It remains an open question. It just feels too George-like in its construction and execution.
I don't know. If you listen to George stuff around that time, I mean, it wasn't. What can you say? What's from Revolver beforehand? I mean, She Said, da 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 da, kind of, and Paul and
Julian solo.
Anya Birkin singers Paul and George together. So who came up with that idea? I'm not sure. That's constructed, very constructed. I think Paul can construct things, but listen to, when it gets to the White Album, Paul's solos are very constructed. Even acoustic things like Mother Nature's Son has got very similar things to Fixing a Hole. Anyway, I can't play it at the moment, but Paul constructs stuff. I mean, he can do some wild things, but Taxman is very constructed. I don't know about its first take. I'm not even sure whether I'm not sure whether it was slowed down to do it. I start to listen to it and go that sounds sped up.
I guess what I'm saying here is maybe we're not going to know the answers to everything. We can only come up with what we think is most. We can try to, but we can come up with what we think is most probable. But nobody's ever going to agree on everything, and that's okay.
Sure. Okay.
It's impossible to solve all the mysteries of the Beatles universe. We can have a good go at it.
Yes, that's the thing. Yeah.
All right. We'll leave that one where it is and move on. 1967, It's All Too Much, tracked at the Lane Lair recording studio basement. So this one as you referred to earlier, Marcus, George's gap year, 1967, where he's writing his songs on keyboard because he's putting his writing efforts into sitar. And it's another song apparently written on organ, like Within You, Without You, and Only a Northern Song, and Blue Jay Way. So it seems pretty natural that George would be playing the organ on that. And that's something I don't think there's too much argument with.
Yes, he's definitely playing the organ. No.
Where we have more argument is who makes the utterance at the beginning and who's playing the lead guitar. I think we're pretty confident Ringo drums, Paul bass, but lead guitar, do we want to ascribe it all to John? Is he doing the feedback? Is Paul playing the lead and John the feedback? Where do we fall on this one?
I think a lot of people think one of the reasons, consciously, people think, oh, it's John playing the intro because it's his voice first. To your mother, or whatever, to your mother. And so, oh, it's John speaking to the microphone before it hits the chord. And they're like, no, when you're doing the guitar, like there's no vocal microphone. It's an edit piece, the whole thing. That intro is edited because it's 2 strikes of the guitar. I know how it's done. So 4 bars of, with feedback and, with the tape echo going on. And the last one, which is just the E string harmonic kind of, but you don't hear the harmonic strike on the recording. And it goes like, it's Paul on guitar. And John on bass, because it's so easy to tell it's John on bass because it's really, really rough. And plays some, when he breaks down, the breakdown sort of boom, 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 boom. He actually plays like C sharp or something like that. It's very non-Paul. To me, it's easily John. Hanging on one note, it's something easy to do.
Now, this is before they were gifted all that gear from Fender, right? So what bass do we think he would have been playing? The Burns?
Well, if they had a bass, yeah. He plays bass on Fixing Our Holes. No one seems to know, there's no pictures of what George and John playing when they play bass. Well, as I was saying, I think it's George on bass on I'm Looking Through You. So I've been told that there is shots of a Epiphone casino bass, Reveille or something it's called. I was told this morning, which could possibly be the one they used. It's like semi-acoustic bass. They had access to that, apparently. So I don't know what bass you're playing, but probably the Burns. But you listen to it, and it's really, it's kind of very boring. That breakdown, it's some really bum notes there. Paul, he was on a roll. He was guitar king. He had his casino. He was feedback. He loved all that. And George was playing the organ. So to me, it's pretty straightforward. The hardest part with me was trying to work out the intro because it's like I went through all different ways of trying to do it, putting through my tape echo and using the speed to slow it down for the second part. But I'm not sure. But listen to it and trying again, I realized, it's much easier than I thought. Everything's usually the simpler way, easier way to play anything is how the Beatles played it. You find the simple way, the easiest way, and it's usually the most logical way. And that's usually how they did it. Not really doing anything too virtuoso in terms of clever kind of things, but just the stuff that works. It sounds good. It fits the song. And, with a bit of studio trickery with the tape echo and all that sort of stuff, you can create this thing. But I think it's easily, people say, oh, it's John's style. But what's John's style, for guitar? Really? I mean, where else has he played like that? Or
I've got a few things about this one. So the first thing is, I'm not actually sure it's John going to your mop. I'm not sure it's him doing that at all. To me, it sounds like George shouting.
To your mop.
Yeah, it just sounds like George to me. But I think it's one of these things, like people thinking that John shouted, "I've got blisters on my fingers," because that would be a John thing to do. I had somebody who believed it was John singing "Why Don't We Do It in the Road" because it was rocky and gruff, and that's just a John thing, you know.
Yeah, it was the same thing. Same thing with the bass.
So you're yelling "to your muck" or whatever it is, that's like a John thing to do, but it actually sounds like George with his voice raised to me. So I don't really know about that one. What we do know is that all this was done on a 4-track, and 4 things were recorded simultaneously, which was drums, guitar, bass, and organ. So the vocals, there wasn't a guide vocal done. So we know that they were all done. We know that Ringo played drums. George wrote the song on organ. I'm pretty sure he sat there and played it on organ. It was his organ year. I agree with you. I think it's Paul on guitar. Now, the reason I believe that is it goes back to what we were saying in the previous track, which is about Paul's he liked being spontaneous on guitar. Probably I think he was generally, apart from his acoustic guitar tracks, I think he was generally a lot less considered in his approach to playing guitar, the lead guitar, but also playing lead guitar on George and John's songs. As we know, Paul is a lot more considered in the parts that he comes up with for his own songs, and his post-Beatles career really shows that. His playing a lot of the time isn't quite as inventive as it used to be when he was contributing to John and George songs. But also, and this is another example of an error, it's Paul said that he was inspired by Jimi Hendrix to go to a guitar shop and say, I want one of those because I want to sound like Jimi Hendrix. Well, he bought that guitar in, I think, 65, well before Hendrix even showed up. So Paul's not remembering that. But certainly by the time they recorded this on May the 25th, 1967, Hendrix was in their universe, and Hendrix was massively admired, particularly by McCartney, who tribute to him in concert to this day. So I think this is and it's an Epiphone, I think this is very much Paul trying to do a Hendrix, Paul trying to do some of the stuff that his hero was doing. And as for the bass, I think, John's perfectly capable of thrumming away on one note, but there is that bit sort of before the horns come in where he goes up, doo, doo, doo.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And that doo, doo,
he plays really bum notes.
It's a really bum note. It just sounds like, and Paul's bass parts that he put on John and Paul's songs were so incredibly inventive and wonderful. I don't think he would have put in a bum note deliberately and just gone, oh, yeah, we'll leave that. So, yes, I totally agree with you. And the second overdub was George's vocal, John and Paul on backing vocals, and hand claps. And then the third one was the doubled vocal, more backing vocals, hand claps, tambourines, maracas, cowbell. So a bunch of percussion went on. And then actually quite a bit later in October, they put on the horn overdub.
There's lots of bouncing down then. So
basically what happened is the 4 tracks they did were all bounced down to 1. And that left 3 tracks for other things.
Which is why it's hard to determine. A lot of the time the guitar disappears and it's quite a muddy mix. It's another drone thing. See, it's Paul's specialty. It's all like just like so. It's all like the drone thing, which Paul he plays guitar on Rain. He's doing a droning guitar on that. So George, I'm a George fan. I played George in tribute bands since 93. So I'm a big fan of George. But when I go to do the tribute to George on Fixing a Hole, to my surprise, my horror, it's not George. It's not him. And same thing for I think I love to be playing all this stuff, but he really got his mojo happen again in White Album when Ravi Shankar said go back to being rock god. So from then on, he was going for it. He's White Album, he's really rocking again. 67 is keyboards, is sitar or organ, whatever, and he sort of let Paul go on with it, and I think Paul got out of his system sort of thing, but when it got down to the White Album, and I'm the guitar player again, so Paul still do some lead and stuff on a White Album for his stuff, but George came back very strongly. But for this one, another drone one, another Paul drone sort of thing. So, that's my story.
Yeah, I agree. I think that whole thing is like, John, it's this whole image of John as being, the one who's the outrageous one, who does all the outrageous things.
Exactly. They're saying, oh, no, helter skelter, and we'll get to helter skelter soon. But
he would make the feedback noise, but as far as I know, he didn't really do any feedback till Cambridge 69.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's just be like, ooh.
More about Yoko's influence, I think, than Hendrix's influence.
But sticking with the Yellow Submarine soundtrack, we'll move on to Hey Bulldog. I think the bone of contention here is Hey Bulldog, who's playing the lead guitar on that. The promo film showing the tracking of that song, we got John on piano. I don't think anybody disputes that for the finished track, but he does have a guitar in his hands. You see at one point in that footage him handing it to George. You don't see anybody playing the lead solo, unfortunately, at that shining moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was an overdub caught after they caught the footage they did or what.
Because they're doing it for Lady Madonna.
But I've had at least one person tell me on the basis of the fact that there's triplets in it, that it must be John because that was his signature move.
Yeah.
What say you?
I think what reason why they didn't have a film a solo because it was originally for Lady Madonna film clip, so probably there's no guitar solo on that, so I suppose they didn't feel the need to kind of do that. But I think maybe John maybe showing George some ideas sort of thing, so that's tossing back forward guitar, but I think it's George. I've got no real evidence to say, but I think they're kind of doing a film thing in the studio and you basically do your role. George is lead guitar player, so he did a solo, and it's not terribly hard. It's got triplets in it and that sort of thing, but it's constructed like double stops and all that kind of thing. It just follows a chord like George does in lots of songs. It's chordal. John could play it as well, but I'd put my money on George. Not much money, but I put it on.
Is there a practical reason based on the tracks or anything else you can think of that would suggest one way or another what would be?
No, not really. If you go through the tracks, here's what we know. We know that on track 1 we had piano, guitar, drums, and tambourine. Now, we can see in the film clip Paul bashing the tambourine along with Ringo's drums. We can see John on piano. He wrote it on piano. It was one of the few songs that he'd actually written on keyboards by that time. And there was guitar. That was George on his SG. They were all recorded onto one track simultaneously. So there's no bouncing, nothing. In fact, there's no bouncing on this song at all. It's extremely simple recording. So the next thing that went down was simultaneous again, extra snare. We've heard that kind of big echoing snare of Ringo's.
Right, in the chorus.
You can talk to me. Yeah, you can talk to me.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful sound. We've got Paul's bloody brilliant bass line. And we've got a guitar. This is where there's guitar doubling coming in. So if we agree that George played guitar on one, then the dun 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 dun, there's no reason to think that George wouldn't have doubled his own guitar there.
Yeah.
The third thing that was recorded was the vocal, and that was just one vocal track. That was just them at the mic, one vocal track. But for the next superimposition, overdub if you like, there was a third vocal, which is John doubling the You Can Talk to Me bits, and then guitar 3, which is the solo. So here's the thing. If we know that it was recorded simultaneously and John's doing You Can Talk to Me, he ain't going to be playing the solo at the same time on the same track. He's not going to have a mic propped in front of him to do that. Once again, this comes down to a construction thing, and I think this is George kind of getting back his rock mojo a little bit, which he'd also done in Lady Madonna. His riff playing on that is very similar. It's a very similar feel. What a double A-side those two songs would have made. My goodness, you know. It would have been the next Paperback Bride of Rain, really. Not to diss the Inner Light.
The Lady Madonna riff is doubled with John and George playing guitars together. Yeah.
That's exactly right, yes. For my feeling with this solo, and once again it's a probability thing, is that it sounds very constructed to me. It is very constructed. I've learnt that solo, and it's kind of constructed. It moves around the chords in that verse pattern, which is not something that John did. John didn't really move around chords very much in verse patterns. I know you've given a couple of examples where that's not the case.
It's very similar to Every Little Thing, the same notes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that puts it in John's favour in a way. But
to me, that kind of thing of like quickly flying up an octave, diddle-diddle-diddle, all that kind of stuff. It feels too tightly constructed for it not to be a George solo to me. It just feels like George. It doesn't feel like a John solo to me. But of course, the proof is, if there is any proof, is the fact that the doubled vocal of John's went down on the same track at the same time as the lead solo. So John...
Well, that convinces it for me anyway.
John wasn't doing both at the same time. So for me, personally, that settles that matter.
I agree.
Fast forward to later in 1968, Dear Prudence, August. Ringo has walked out, so it's a different version of the Threedles.
This is the big one. This keeps going on.
There is a controversy or a debate over the coda and the drumming there.
Yeah.
But let's focus on the rest of the track first. Is there anything contentious we can point to in terms of guitars or anything else? We know that Paul's playing drums on the basic track.
Yep.
I just want to ask Marcus one question before we start.
Okay.
And that is John's acoustic guitar, the main thing that goes throughout the entire song. Do you hear that as double track?
I do, but it could be ADT, but they were doing it at Trident. Did they have ADT there? I know it could be mixed back in EMI.
According to the information I have here, 2 acoustic guitars recorded simultaneously for that basic track, and that was John and George.
Yeah, I hear 2. If it was ADT, it comes in on the 5th bar or something. Around here, you hear another one come in. So either they put ADT on just from that point onwards and took it out again when it comes to the coda. I don't know, but I think here too.
It's worth bringing in a Giles quote here. So when the original stereo mix, like many of their mixes, was a bit weird because John's guitar was all the way over to the right, and then suddenly his voice appears out of nowhere in the middle. When Giles mixed it, and I remember distinctly hearing it go, wow, those guitars have been spread across the stereo spectrum. But he specifically said that he applied ADT to John's acoustic guitar because, quote unquote, that's what the Beatles did anyway.
Right. Oh, maybe, yeah.
Right.
He chose to add ADT to that guitar, which indicated there wasn't ADT on it previously.
Right, yeah. Well, it sounds like 2 to me. I guess it comes in, but at the same, when they're doing the drum track, there's another guitar, electric guitar, doing the B and E strings. And it even does when it goes to that part, it still does it there, but it comes out after that. So there's so many guitar parts. There's in the bridge, there's a guitar doing. And in the coda, it comes in the coda as well, but it doubles up it's very much a John thing. It's like a reggae thing. What he's going, yeah. So to me, that's John overdubbing that, because at the same time as it's got the sort of thing. George, I think on SG. So I think it's double tracked. I think guitar's double tracked, and it's so much layering going on. Some of the guitars, it's just, you just think I'd love to know how they constructed it. Even not going into the coda, which is another edit piece, because a lot of things that people don't mention is that the bass changes as well for the coda. So to me, the bass and the original drum track have been mixed together. So Paul have gone the bass, and when they got rid of the original drums, because they did get rid of it, you can hear the remains of it in John's vocal. It's leaking through John's vocal mic, that they had to wipe off the whole bass track. So the bass changes. So you got this totally different bass sound for the coda, which could be played by someone else. You never know. It could be just to free up the tracks.
Well, say more about the drum part, because now you're leading to the thing that's been the
controversy. Yeah,
there are people who've done research into this that comes to the conclusion that there's a Ringo overdub.
Yeah.
Upon his return to the fold.
Yeah,
or before even the official date, because apparently the fabled trip to Sardinia when he did his walkout either didn't happen then but happened later.
Yeah.
And that he could have been in town during the time he formally left the Beatles and stopped showing up at EMI, that he might have been brought in to finish that track.
There's photos allegedly of him being here, but I don't buy it. I just don't buy it at all.
Okay.
The facts doesn't work. I mean, one thing is Ken Scott, who was at Trident, he said that the recording and mixing was all done in a couple of days, which is not quite true, because it was actually a couple of months later, or about 5 weeks later, that they did first proper remix. But regardless of that, we only really have a record of the drums going down over on 2 dates, and that is August the 28th and August the 30th. Ringo wasn't in the band. He wasn't around to do that. There's no record of a final drum overdub being done on some other unknown date when he returned from Peter Sellers' yacht. There is no record of that. To me, this sort of comes down to that thing once again of people listen to the drumming and go, oh, that's pretty good, therefore it can't be Paul.
Yeah.
And people sort of talk about the drumming on the last verse of Dear Prudence being like the most amazing drumming in the Beatles canon. I think that does Ringo a great disservice. I think the thing about Dear Prudence, which makes it a very unusual song for them for that time, is that it's a builder. It's one that just builds slowly, and it just turns into kind of a Stairway to Heaven-esque explosive rock anthem. It's just built and built and built and built, and then this drumming, this very busy drumming over that verse is like a big climax to it. So because of that sense of build, I think people go, wow, that's really amazing. Therefore, it can't be Paul, it must be Ringo. How many examples do we have of Ringo doing fantastic drumming?
Yeah, the thing about it, why it's not Ringo, is because it's not a performance. You can tell a performance. Ringo would do it, but as it won't go. But it's built. It's a composition.
Constructed?
Yeah, constructed. That's the word. Yeah, it's using the tracks. Must have had to spare some tracks around to comp it together. As famously as the snare sound changes in one part, it's like the people just think, oh, that must be where the towel fell off snare, but that's not true. Like it's just everyone's playing parts where there's at the same time there's a tom going boom, 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 boom. So it's like back in USSR. It's everyone's having a go. Everyone's bashing something together, but it's been edited really well. So it's not a performance. It's constructed.
To hear the isolated bass tracks times 3 on Back in the USSR is quite a remarkable thing. You're listening to 3 different people playing chords simultaneously across the stereo spectrum.
Well, that's how John plays the 6. He plays it chords. He strums on Back in the USSR. He's strumming it like in Dig It.
But Paul and George also did bass on that song, and they also did chords. Yeah. So if you listen to the isolated tracks, it's quite fascinating listening to 3 Beatles playing 3 lots of chords on basses. It's quite a cacophony, really. Sort of back to Prudence, we know that the first thing that went down was 2 acoustic guitars and drums. We know that the second and third things were John's double-track vocals. We know that the fourth thing was George doing a guitar, electric guitar. Fifth thing was George doing another guitar. Then the bass and the tambourine went down simultaneously. Then we've got backing vocals and hand claps, and then more backing vocals and hand claps. And we know there was guests on that, Jackie and Mal. And then the final thing to go down was just a bit more drums. So I think that's kind of the stuff in the last verse where there is an extra snare going on that just sort of is trying to tie the quite loose drum track together. So that's what I think.
There's piano in there too.
Yes, sorry, there is piano on two, not that it's mentioned. Oh yes, I beg your pardon, I've missed a final overdub. The final overdub is yet more guitar, all on piano and probably, but somebody's on flugelhorn as well.
George came in to played octave up. He originally did the
Yes.
then do the
Yeah.
So yeah, he did octaves on that. So
But I think what the point is that we do know that all of this recording was done over 28th, 29th, and 30th of August, and then the recording itself was finished.
yeah, so you don't go back. People say, "Oh, Ringo came back and overdubbed stuff," and there's nothing in the records. And once it's finished, and it's got so many overdubs, you just could not scramble this egg. It's so much there to unscramble it. It'd just be impossible to put more drums on or whatever.
I just think it's what I said. I think it's some people going, you know what, that's too good for Paul. It's got to be Ringo. Then it becomes, oh, it is Ringo. Did you know Ringo dropped that in as an overdub? Well, no, I don't know that. Who knows that? Has anybody got any evidence of that? What? Are you deaf? Of course it's Ringo. And so the internet arguments go. And then you do what I guess a lot of us learn to do. You stop arguing because you realise there's not really much point. And then you just do your own private kind of stuff.
If I get bored doing stuff, I just go back to the YouTube and say, "Oh, how's this going?" And it's still going on.
Yes.
Discussion, and you
exactly.
It's just boredom. You think, no, I don't know. You're waiting for someone to mix down or whatever. You could go, I'll see what's happening here.
Yeah.
It's for While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Helter Skelter, and Dear Prudence. They're the three big goers in YouTube Beatle world.
Indeed they are.
And they keeps going on and on, and people will not change their beliefs. Once you've set in your belief, no matter how much evidence you can give.
3 hours and a day in the life. I know it's settled law. It is for me, but it still isn't for a bunch of people. And even the people who are there disagree on it, and even the people who've worked on the remixes disagree on it. Giles says it's John. He's only ever heard Paul, so I don't understand why anybody thinks it's John.
Well, you've got, as you put out, the people who have their hands on the materials making inaccurate declarations. And now you've got the official historian, Kevin Howlett, putting out these booklets that are also introducing new errors of fact to the debate.
Yes.
And it seems quite evident to me that Paul and Ringo certainly aren't asked to proofread those books, and they probably have absolutely no interest in doing so anyway. They don't really care.
No.
And they wouldn't remember anyway.
Well, maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But the thing is their silence on these matters allows these things to suddenly become fact, but some of them are clearly not.
Right.
Deep Prudence is my very favorite song. Of course, when I did deep dive into it, and guitar work is incredible. I just think it's George's best work.
And you did a great version of it.
Well, the thing is, it was working out. It's like listening to audio cues. This thing that got me interested was all this buzzing sound. Listen to guitar track. It's got all this working out which way it went. It showed me where George played it because it's just I can go on a deep dive in it. But these buzz noise, you go like. So he's going up to that. So it means he's going up. Anyway, it showed me how to do it. And then when it goes I can't remember how to do it. But anyway, it goes a different way. So
very hard to recreate spontaneity.
Yeah, but it's the thing. One of those things when you actually heard the isolated tracks, because when you on the record, you don't hear all this underneath. You don't hear all the kind of all you hear is it. So you get these isolated tracks, and suddenly you hear all this really wild stuff going. And like, wow, it's a whole new world. And the same for all you just hear is that, but it's all these things going underneath it. That's great.
I think that's one of the points. One of the points is there is such a looseness to what they did. There's a looseness and a spontaneity, but it's also considered. So there's a real combination of that. And even if you listen to Abbey Road, which is, supposedly their slickest album, if you listen to the basic tracks,
yes,
it's slick at all.
Exactly.
Listen to that piano sound at the end of something that goes on forever. Listen to, as we said,
You Never Give Me Your Money.
Yeah.
George's jamming. Yes, there's a lot of stuff which is it's not particularly slick at all, and so it really just shows the value of those engineers and that producer, and kind of bringing everything together and recognising the best performances to use and the best bits of those performances to use. But I think at their heart, they were loose.
Mm.
Helter Skelter.
Yep. Okay. Oh, this is a great one. Again. Yeah. This is the perennial. Yeah. Like, it has to be John because, like, it's just got John's aggression. And, you say, look, did you watch Get Back? Like he's struggling to play the chords on. Is George sort of giggling as he's showing in the notes on Long and Winding Road? And Paul's eye roll sort of giving up, it's just totally exasperated. He's like, he wants to give up. The thing is, when they did Long and Winding Road, the next version, when they brought in the organ, because he had his act together a lot better for that one. But for Helter Skelter, we know it's Paul on bass. So, and the mistake is back people quoting Mal Evans' diary, but when you say to people, he's talking about, when he wrote that, he was speaking about the first slow version, which went for 20 minutes, and John played one note the whole way through, one E note, boom, 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 yeah. And it's just one chord song. I mean, like Paul doesn't, or every now and again he plays a riff kind of thing, but guitar. But that's what Mal Evans was talking about. But it gets copied and pasted, when they're doing the marketing or whatever for the song, and people sort of think, oh, that's John's aggressive. He's an aggressive bass player, and it's floppy. Well, you think it's 18th take or something like that of a song, which Paul's doing a guide vocal and screaming it. You listen to the takes, every version, like he's screaming. Yeah. So he's going for it. He's trying to get the most noisiest, grittiest thing. So listen to some of the bass. Yeah, some of the bass is kind of sloppy in a way, but it's live. And you listen to a lot of live things. Listen to Let It Be on rooftop stuff, like isolated bass. Like a lot of it is quite rough.
Yeah, the track is noisy by design.
Exactly. Yeah, he's just going for it. And it's Fender Jazz. I know people think, oh, it's John on the Fender 6, but the proof has come out in different outtakes. We hear the famous outtake of Paul instructing John when to come in, for the leave it for do an extra bar. I can't remember what it was, a certain part, sort of thing. But it's totally John, that revolution type. It is. And listen to the basic track. John's not doing the riff at all. There's only one person playing the riff. That's Paul on the bass. Same as the original version, the slow version recorded 2 months before. Paul's the only one doing the riff, sort of thing. So those riffs are overdubbed on the fast version. I think it's Paul and George together. But the bass, you can hear the bass. Paul showing John how to play the do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Some people think, oh, it's just synchronicity between the great minds thinking alike, how John can sort of, exactly play along exactly with Paul's voice. It's like, wow, they're so synced together. Wow. So no, people aren't like that. Like there's parts where Paul's singing and he's singing along with his bass line. Oh, do, do, do. When he goes up to A and other certain things, but in the riff thing, but John's just playing and you hear it's up and down. He's typical up and down strokes. Kind of thing, like a helter skelter, helter skelter, helter. So yeah, he's just doing a thing and does the kind of. So yeah, it's not a mystery to me.
George is supposed to be playing a fretless guitar on this one.
Every time I hear people demonstrating that the Bartell fretless, it never sounds nothing like what you hear. You sort of think, oh, it could be. I mean, could that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It has that sort of kind of rubbery sort of sound, but I just think it's just normal. Especially I thought maybe he was playing it on the original, very slow version. There's a really annoying guitar going all the way through. Oh, it's bending like it's just like it's
like George to me.
Yeah, it's all the way through. But it's like, to me, it's like he's playing with a fretless. He's got and he's just all he can do, like play sort of. But it's all the way through the song, and he doesn't really play anything. So I think he may be playing the fretless on that song, and that by the time you get to the real thing, it's like, oh no, it's useless. Yeah, well, like even Happiness Is Warm Gun, you go. It's played on normal guitar, but it's just you just bend it. But
he does these amazing things on your blues. Yes, I'm lonely. Wow. And that's on the
yeah. of thing. Yeah. To me, like the proof in that I can't remember what the uptake is, but where Paul is speaking, it just shows that
This song is an interesting example of how your thinking can evolve because, once upon a time in my youth, being a second gen fan, I wouldn't have even worried about who was on bass. And then I knew that Paul was the bass player. So, oh, yeah, it must be Paul on bass. Suddenly I find out this information that John's on bass. So I went through years online of when people go, oh, that's Paul's best bass line. I would correct them and go, oh, no, that's John. Now information has come to light that that's not the case. And, I'm looking at a resource here that clearly says that it's John on bass. But we know that 2 guitars, bass and drums went down simultaneously, so all 4 were playing.
yeah, it's only 3 guitars. One guitar it's just 3 people playing.
Well, I'm talking about the basic track.
Yeah,
so the basic track has 2 guitars, bass and drums, right?
That's the thing. That's one of those things where I thought maybe there was 2 guitars, but I can't hear another guitar. I can only hear the one guitar. So George is sitting it out.
I can hear 2 making a racket. I can hear Paul and George making a bit of racket. Nobody's playing the riff yet.
Except the bass. The bass is.
But here's the thing. So on the 2018 bass thing, the first thing is that they're warming up by having Baby You're So Square. They're doing Baby You're So Square. So we've only got like a minute of that jam. And I know that apparently they may have been on particular substances that night and been speeding off their heads or whatever they might have been on. But that take has like 20, 30 times the energy of virtually anything they did in January 69. So, go figure. But Paul's playing bass on it. Paul's playing bass on that. So what does he do? Suddenly he's go, oi, here, John, you have the bass. I'm going to take over the guitar. You clearly hear him just before Helter Skelter starts singing along with what he's playing simultaneously on the bass. Do, 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 do. You can hear him do that. There's audio evidence that Paul is playing the bass on the track. So that's the evolution for me. It's like, oh, great. Now I've got some new evidence. This changes my mind. Fantastic. I've learned something new.
Well, it's the default position that Paul is the bass player in the Beatles. So when he's not playing bass, there has to be some reason why he's not playing bass. That's my thing. So we know in Get Back because they want to have the pretense of doing no overdubs and that sort of thing. So John gets lumbered with the bass because guitar was deemed more important. So George's guitar. So otherwise, George would play bass because he's a much better bass player than John.
But even if you look at the songs that kind of made it to Get Back, you've got 2 of us, Paul's playing acoustic guitar. Let It Be Long and Winding Road, he's playing piano. One After 909, well, that's basically a John song, so Paul's on bass. And Digger Pony's a John song, Paul's on bass, etc., etc. For You Blue, we know there's no bass on that. Get Back, well, he composed it on bass. We saw him compose it on bass, and it's probably the simplest bass line he ever played in the Beatles. So he's playing bass for that. I've got a feeling, well, it's a duo kind of song, and he kind of had to play bass on that, really. But if you come back to Helter Skelter, I think it's just so clear that we know that it's him on bass now. We just know that.
It's that sound. I mean, that jazz sound, that crunchiness. It's
Too dirty for Paul, but then you listen to Glass Onion. What a bite and crunch that has. You listen to Even I'm So Tired or Piggies in particular, the real crunch to that sound.
Exactly. Yes.
Paul is quite capable of getting down and dirty, and it's not just that rebel John who's capable of doing that. Paul has a lot of different approaches to everything. So,
Julia, John is a soft, like he's Julia, and he does some rocking for a few songs, but yeah, it's the default position is Paul is a bass player, so you give me a reason why he's not playing bass on a particular song, because otherwise he'd overdub it. Like White Album, like George's sit in for Honey Pie and that sort of stuff. It's all very simple. Rock a Raccoon. They don't really have spectacular bass lines for things like that. So yeah, well, do it at the same time. As much instruments you could get onto the one track, the better. It's like in Abbey Road, like in Golden Slumbers and that sort of thing.
And, rounding off Helter Skelter, we've got somebody's got blisters on their fingers. Why do people say John? I know we've talked about it already, but because John's the rebel. John's the one who would scream something.
Yeah. But he gets to be rebel because he does it. And he just does it really well.
Fantastic.
Do we think George is playing guitar in the basic track along with John?
I don't think so. I can only hear. Oh no! The more I listen to it, I just think no. There's only one guitar. I used to think there was one guitar doing sort of playing the low E note, bending it, kind of thing. But the more I listen to it, like no, it's just. I think because there's two guitars doing them.
So he's doubling up Paul for that part at least.
Yeah, and I can't really tell who's doing a solo. I don't really know who's doing a solo.
That's Paul.
It could be, yeah. I don't know, but it's got that, yeah. It could be George too. I mean, it's a Paul song, so you might want to pull rank and think, I've got something for this, or it could be both. It could be each taking turns. It could be Paul doing the, kind of very rubbery sort of sound, and George and sort of Abbey Road kind of Eric Clapton type thing. I don't know. They could both play it, but unless someone comes out and says,
we know that there's 4 guitars on it. So if what I have in front of me is to believe, there were 2 guitars on the basic track, who we think are John and George, and then there was another track of simultaneous 2 guitars being played, and we know that that's the riff as part of that.
Yeah, I can't hear another guitar. I can. How many times I hear it and the isolated tracks? I've had it for 15 years, and where is that? There's only one guitar, and they could do that. Keep it simple. Like we work on either someone to tambourine, or we didn't really need a tambourine on that thing, but I think. Another guitar. Sometimes you hear another guitar because it's just the one guitar feeding through the vocal track, and gives that kind of ADT effect. I think anyway. But I have to listen to it again. Maybe I can find another guitar, but for the moment I can't find it. But it's definitely Paul on bass, and I know it's going to go on forever and ever. No one's going to believe that. But I don't know. What can you do?
I don't see why they wouldn't believe it when we have the audio evidence there, when we can hear them singing.
Yeah, but because it's been written and it's official, it's been all people say, the Beatles Bible and the such and such and this, in the official thing. And I don't have the official booklets. I never get those. I can't afford those re-releases. But I listen to it. It's not on YouTube or whatever, or it's great. But so the booklets, I've got no idea what they say. If people tell me, it's John on bass, and I know.
Well, this next one. To fairly recently, to the 50th anniversary, I don't think there was too much contention other than who was playing bass because of a George quote in an interview. That's Old Brown Shoe. But come to 50th, now we've got a new contention introduced by Kevin Howlett as to who's playing drums on this track, which to this point, anybody with ears didn't have. But suddenly now it's part of the official legend.
This is the one.
Are we in unanimous agreement without even having a debate? That's Ringo playing drums on Old Brown Shoe?
100%. No doubt whatsoever.
Absolutely.
It's just...
I think if you just look at Kevin Howlett's assertion was that he couldn't have played because he was filming The Magic Christian. So there's a few things wrong with that, just to spell it out for people who haven't heard of this stuff before. The first thing is that The Magic Christian was largely filmed in London. Now, I'm not sure that Ringo was occupied 24 hours a day for months and not allowed to do anything else.
No, they weren't on location, and based on what I've seen, he had weekends and evenings off.
Well, yes, I did try and look for the shooting schedule, but I couldn't find it, so if you found it, wonderful. But the thing is, it was a short session. It was a relatively short session. It was one evening, the basic track, there was no percussion overdubs at all. So it was just the drum track.
Well, George demoed it before everyone in the session beforehand. He had it all. So he was there earlier and he demoed it, which I don't know what happened to that demo. No one's ever heard maybe it was wiped over for the Beatles session. But so George would have worked out exactly what he wanted. And so by the time they all turn up, they knew what to do.
I guess the thing is that, we do know from exactly the same records, like the Kevin Howlett stuff, is that 3 days after this track was done, Ringo added the congas to I Want You. So the filming had wrapped and he was suddenly available again to come and do a conga overdub?
Twickenham anyway, so it's like a 45-minute drive, I think.
I think that it's like he doesn't say there's any evidence that Ringo didn't play drums on it. He just says he couldn't have because of this.
This is not new information. We knew he was shooting Magic Christian since 1969, and not until 2019 did suddenly this get thrown into the mix as, well, because he was making this film the same day they recorded this. I don't know what he's basing that on, but clearly not the audio evidence.
No. It's got Ringo's DNA all through it.
Oh, yeah. We could talk about that. The floor tom and snare, it's a move he'd been making at least as far back as 64.
Tell Me Why.
Yeah, Tell Me Why. Help.
Tell Me Why. Yeah.
Yeah, we could see him at A Hard Day's Night doing it in that back shot where they're doing the concert sequence. So we know what it looks like even.
Oh, yeah. And Paul says himself he can't play shuffles, and it's a shuffle, and whenever Paul's done a shuffle, like Hell on Wheels, it's constructed together. It's you listen to it, it's got a drum machine thing, and the ride cymbal is recorded separately, going all the way through. So it's how I do drums, home recording, because I'm not a great drummer, but you edit and you put bits and do the kicks, do things separately or whatever if you need to. But Hell on Wheels, it's all it's put together, like it's piecemeal, yeah. And I reckon, listen to the outtakes, you can tell that on the basic track that George is not on guitar. That's one thing you can 100% say. So, of course, the guitar makes mistakes when George is singing. Comes out the "I Want to Love It." The guitar does the riff again. So in that, if you're singing it, you don't make the mistake on your own thing. I want to love. That's right. It happens all the time. So, I think that's why one reason I thought maybe John on the guitar, because he'd be prone to make mistakes, but pretty sure it's Paul on guitar.
And we'd been told back when Recording Sessions book came out from Lewison that John had played a rhythm guitar part that then got wiped in favor of organ. I guess the tape box was marked rhythm guitar, but then that was crossed out and then somebody wrote organ like it was a revision of the track. But we have no real evidence that he played rhythm guitar ever on it got wiped, right?
No, in the outtakes we hear, there's no other guitar. There's just three. There's piano, guitar, and vocals. What else is there?
So, and I beg your indulgence here, because I think this is the one where I got really quite passionate about this one. It was because of the Kevin Howlett thing. So I just really wanted to figure out for myself. And the final thing I'd say about the drums is that through the period of a few days in January 69, Ringo eventually came up with pattern that he kind of reproduced 3 months later.
George says himself, he mouthed it sort of. There's actually the audio of him doing it, and then suddenly we go, like.
More like.
All right. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to the dentist now.
Like.
And then you're going to go and see him.
That's
or maybe many things. I had never really heard him as a Ringo impersonator. Or now I will remember what Ringo did months ago and I'm going to reproduce that.
And yet there are people out there who believe this conspiracy theory that when Ringo would go home for the day, Paul would wipe his drum parts and replace them himself.
Oh, yes.
It's on the level of Bernard Purdy.
Goodness. Right.
I think that was Peter Brown. Peter Brown said that, yes. And it's sort of rubbish.
Look, I think it's sort of got to come down to probabilities here. So we're all in agreement that we believe it's Ringo on drums and that Kevin Howlett just muddied the waters for some reason, God knows why. We do know that on the basic track there was a guide vocal which wasn't used. There was a guide vocal that wasn't used. We know that there's a guitar and it sounds very much like an Epiphone to me, Casino. And we know that there's piano. Now, George, this is where we come back to who wrote the song on what. So George wrote the song on piano. It's a very difficult instrument, that piano, as he tells Billy Preston. But he showed it to them on the piano. And, yeah, they did a bit of experimental swapping around in late January when they were looking at that song. But essentially, George wrote it on piano. It's like John did a rare track, Hey Bulldog, before he went all Imagine on us, So then in February, he has a birthday present, 26th birthday present to himself. He records a demo of Old Brown Shoe again, and he puts on, so he does it on piano as the basic track and sings along at the same time. And then he overdubs electric guitar. And the guitar part that he puts on there is nothing like the guitar part that's on track of the song. So why wouldn't, and also if you look at the guitar part that's played on that basic track, it's already in place as the all that's in place. I don't know if you've ever tried playing that and singing that at the same time. Pretty difficult to do. It's but going on the piano, the two-handed thing on the piano is quite possible. So when did John ever show up and play on a George song but Paul played nothing in the studio? Did that ever happen? No, it didn't. So we know there's 4 elements. So there's a vocal that wasn't used. We know there's drums. We know there's guitars, piano. I contend it's George on piano playing the same part that he wrote the song on, that he demoed on in February, that he recorded prior to the day, early in the session, again on piano while singing. And then later that day, he played the piano and sang for the basic track. That is my belief. Therefore, I think it's highly unlikely that John would have played guitar on it. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But I believe it's Paul playing that guitar part, and I think that he's being loose on it in a way that he wouldn't be for his own tracks, and maybe he's a little looser with John George tracks. So that's why I remember this big kerfuffle when the remixed Blue came out a few years ago, and people were going, "Oh, Giles has left out guitars. He's left out ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, the little riff that's played in the verses. Oh, he's left some of that. He's dropped them out. Oh my goodness." What they actually did is that guitar part was doubled, but not doubled perfectly. Sometimes Paul forgot to play those bits. He didn't play them. It was quite loose. But when they mixed it for stereo originally in 1969, they put those guitars on top of each other, exactly like they did on the 2 guitars for She Said, She Said. They didn't have them separated. So the imperfections, if you like, were somewhat masked by them being actually mixed together. Not on the same track, but they were panned together. So you've got this kind of doubling effect together. So I believe that Paul played the guitar on that basic track, and, he made a pretty good fist of it. It was fine, and he and George probably figured out the those bits prior to that. So then you come to the first overdub, and the first overdub is, once again, it's a simultaneous one. It's 2 people playing something at the same time, and they are the second guitar, which mostly doubles the first guitar, and the bass. So the question is, why on earth would George double a part that Paul has just played? He wouldn't. He would just double his own part. George said, and I believe it was 1976, when somebody was trying to curry favour with him by saying, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like Paul being his typically busy self on that song, Old Brown Shoe." And George goes, "Well, no, that's me being my busy self." So George was very quick to correct and say, "I played the bass on it." So if George said that he played bass on his own song and he remembered it and he corrected an interviewer, I think that's pretty trustworthy. And if we know that that guitar and that bass was recorded simultaneously, and we know that George is on bass, then it must be Paul doubling his guitar on that second bit of the recording. So then we've got a few more elements. I'll just go through them.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
But just say one thing about the remix, which was a good thing. The bass is much more clearer and is definitely a Fender 6. You can hear the sort of exactly same sound. I couldn't really tell that in the original version. It's just sort of, but hearing it in the remix with all, it's not a great remix actually. It's one of the worst remixes I've ever heard. Guitars are really tuned down, like they're not there, not But the bass is, you listen to it and like, it has its rough bits. It's typical, like George is winging it a bit. You know, he's going for it, but when he gets to a certain chord, he's just going descending or whatever. But it's not the drilled kind of McCartney style. It's got that looseness to it, but the sounds like soul. That's just typical Fender 6. It's the sort of tone, and it's easy to play it. You're just playing like a guitar. So those riffs on a jazz bass or something like that, or Rickenbacker, yeah, it's really hard. But on the Fender 6, it's just like a guitar. So you can play it much more easier. So yeah, it's definitely George, and what you say, Paul doubling up, not all the guitar, but just the sort of, and sometimes he forgets. And of course, you're doing it on the same time. You're not going to go back and say, "Oh, I'll just do another version because I mucked up around this part, whatever."
The remix, in a sense, does us a favour because it splits those two guitars, so we know it's doubled, and we know that it was doubled imperfectly. And look, the rest of how the recording went down is it's not contentious particularly. Tucked himself into a little corner and faced the wall and sang his lead vocal while John and Paul were doing some backings. John had arrived by this time. There's witnesses who say they saw them working on the backing vocals for ages. Then a fourth track went down of more backing vocals, so there's more shouting and yelling and all that kind of stuff. And then the final two things were George put down an organ part. We know that he liked to add keyboards to his own songs. And then 2 days later, he added his perfectly worked out solo. And during the mixing process of that, some ADT was added in increasing amounts, whilst that solo, it was probably during the mixing phase, but ADT got added. So it just sort of suddenly sounds at the end like the guitar is spread and it's doubled, but in fact they've ADT'd it and spread it incrementally. And there you've got the end of that song. To me, after a lot of looking at this, this is what rings true for me. So just in summary, Ringo drums, Paul guitar, George piano for the basic track, and then Paul doubling his guitar and George playing bass like he said he did.
There's also sticks, Ringo playing sticks as well.
That's not listed in my resource, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't know when that was done, but it's done at the same time as something. Anyway, maybe it was done at the same time as.
Yeah, not sure where that.
Usually, you can tell by the panning on the original one whether it's like if it's on the same track. It's usually it's in the same panning position.
The fact that percussion is missing from my resource, it just goes to show that even the best resources, they're not always going to get it right. They're just not.
Yeah, yeah. No one seems to mention the tick. Yeah, that's a very important part of the song as well.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Makes it gallop along.
So this leaves us with Come Together.
All right, okay.
Being another one that I felt like the waters got unnecessarily muddied when Emmerich told the story about John watching Paul play the electric piano part over his shoulder and then sort of nudging him aside and then play
it. That's just so stupid. It's really, people don't do that, You're like, the thing is, it's not as easy as the left hand is doing a walking thing, and John's piano left hand is usually just playing the bass note, like just not really doing much. It's playing a different rhythm. It's only someone like Paul could play. Go, da, 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 but the other one's going boom, ding, ding, walking up in a different kind of time thing. You don't really hear it until you hear the isolated track because it's, like a lot of the stuff like Deep Prudence, you only hear the high bits, but below it's going boom, ding, 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 this walking bass line. And that's beyond John. You just don't do that thing, Stu. When something is done, it's done. I say, oh, that's good, I want to do it. It's like, it's not school kids, it's just not like schoolyard. These are professionals. And if you can do it, like say, George say, like if Paul, if you can do it, do it. His own songs, like John say, like It's just trying to get the song finished. And whoever can do that part will do it. There's no ego. And
that's a John signature move. Just bash it out and get it done.
So,
don't belabor it.
For that thing, Paul on keyboards, for sure. Yeah.
I got to say, it's a total curiosity as to why John chose to do it in the key of E at the one-to-one concert.
Yes.
Exactly.
And making it so that he couldn't reach the notes in the chorus. I mean, that's the way I played it when I was a teenager, thinking, oh, it must be an E.
Yeah. And he does it like...
Well, I knew better. You play Smoke on Water in E and G, you know?
It's just absolutely how he could do that. Like, yeah. Maybe he forgot.
That's because he didn't play guitar on the main track.
Exactly.
So I think
true.
That's where we come to, you know, who did what. The big curiosity of it, I mean, the electric piano thing, when I read that from Jeff Emmerich, I thought, as if John's going to look over Paul's shoulder and go, now, move aside, I'm going to do it instead. No. John liked to work very quickly, and when it was done, and whoever played. Then he actually played minimal stuff on songs, and he didn't contribute a lot to the overdubbing process anyway. That was mainly Paul and George.
No.
Curious thing about Come Together for me, well, there's a few things. One is the backing vocals. Paul muddied the waters very early on. Yeah, I think it might have been about 71 or something.
No, it was 70, talking to Ray Connolly.
Ah, right, okay.
Right.
So he said he was too embarrassed to ask John to sing on it. But that doesn't mean that he didn't ask John to sing on it. It just says he was too embarrassed. He doesn't say, therefore, I didn't sing on it. Once again, it's like putting one and one together and getting three. He didn't say that he didn't sing on it. He just said that he was embarrassed to ask because that was the state of their relationship at the time. And also he was talking at a time when they had all publicly fallen out finally and the supposed split had happened and all that. He was just giving an example of the state of affairs at the time. And yet you listen to the isolated tracks and there's Paul doing his baritone thing, which is, I love that voice that he uses. He used it quite a lot in 68, 69. And, you know, it was an amazing voice that he first brought up for Lady Madonna. It's a wonderful voice.
That's his Elvis voice. Lady, hold on.
He uses all three of those voices in You Never Give Me Your Money. And I just love the effect of that, the beauty of his vocal tracks in that. To me, that is the great underrated Beatles song for me.
I think he does all the harmonies as well on that song.
Oh, well, he does till we get to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bits.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, back to what I was saying. We have audio evidence. We know that Paul does the backing vocals in the verse and John sounds like John is doubling himself in the choruses and the last.
Even the photos.
Exactly right.
They're both around the microphone and you see Yoko's feet.
Toe jam football. Monkey finger, Coca-Cola. I know you, you know me. Come together right now over me.
Very clear that Paul does sing on. But the other big enduring mystery for me, and I used to argue about this years ago or try and figure it out, is why I can only really hear George on guitar. And for all the parts, they all just sound like George to me. It just seems that that's what they are. But, of course, you read so many bits of evidence that say John's on guitar. And so I was like, well, where's he on guitar? Where's he on guitar? The first thing is if you go and look through the tracks, there are actually 6 guitar tracks put down. But what you see is that one of them at least, or 2 of them, were never used. And I just thought, oh, okay, right. But when you listen to, like I've been doing the research over the last couple of weeks, you can hear there are guitar parts that were played, that were put on the track, but were mixed out, were not left. My contention is that John, and it seems to me that John probably did contribute some guitar via an overdub, but it wasn't used. Because all I'm really hearing is I'm hearing George playing rhythm in the verses, I'm hearing George continuing that rhythm the whole way through the song, and I'm hearing George doing harmonised lead in the solo, and I'm hearing him doing the single lead at the end. That's all the guitar, apart from that little volume swell in the prelude to the last.
Well, actually, tell you now, there is another guitar, the ghost guitar, and it's actually on the final thing as well. But it happens during the keyboard solo. It's when a guitar get like. I only found this out this couple of days ago. I'm going, I never noticed it before. On the outtake it was really loud and it goes on for a long time. But actually on the final record, yeah. And it's definitely a casino. It sounds exactly like this. Have a listen again. It's there. So that could be John doing his...
I'll have another listen. I certainly heard that in the isolated tracks and was very surprised to hear it. It was great to hear it. It was great to hear a new part that I never heard. They are the gift that keeps giving. But I can't really hear it in the final mix, but I'll listen after this and see what I can hear.
Yeah, it's there. Like, I was surprised because the keyboards are distracting you, but there's this other guitar. You find these things and it's like you never heard before and you go, wow, there's so much still to find out.
Well, that probably solves the mystery of why John is alleged to be playing guitar on the song.
Yeah.
Virtually inaudible on guitar on the song.
Yeah, true. But I never heard it before, but I just found it's like, whoa, it's great. Learn things all the time.
It's only during the keyboard break?
Yeah, it's just like... Yeah, that's why you don't hear it, but you hear just the guitar track.
So do you think that's on the basic track?
No.
It's an overdub.
It's one of the many guitar overdubs.
Yeah, because basic track was just George going...
Now, here's an interesting thing. So the electric piano was recorded apparently simultaneously onto one track with another guitar.
Right.
I contend that Paul was playing the piano while John was playing that little hidden part.
Right, yes. As he's looking over his shoulder, there's John playing. Yes.
Yes, I think they were. Maybe that's where Jeff Emerick's memory gets a bit confused, because I think that they were working together on that part.
They're kind of like the same notes, and you got...
Yes.
Boom.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So maybe John was looking over his shoulder to get an idea of what to play on the guitar, and then, well, quite clearly here they recorded it simultaneously.
Wow.
There's still things to find. There's so many songs and so many mysteries to unravel.
Crack the code.
One thing that's worth saying is that the isolated tracks are just an absolute gift. It's wonderful. It's a new way of hearing the music. It's fantastic.
Yeah. When I first heard Good Morning, realized everyone got it wrong. Everyone in the world had got it wrong because the bass disguised what the chords were doing.
That's right. And the horns.
Because the bass will play C sharp while A minor is going on. And this sort of the secret things why sometimes you unravel these things, you realize why it sounds so interesting or good, because things you don't know about. This is because the guitar is playing A minor and the bass is playing C sharp, but we don't know that. We just know it sounds interesting. And like Michelle, because Michelle it's major, like Michelle, my bell. You know, this is B flat, but it's got the vocal sings D flat while the guitar plays a D and the harmony does a low D. You get that Frenchy kind. That's why it gets so Frenchy, because it's kind of chord. And the combination with Good Morning, you know, it's A minor. Nothing to do to save life. I got that tune, but sometimes the bass is doing this run, boom, dun, 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 but you go. So it's really weird. And when you hear when I actually heard the isolated tracks for the first time, everyone who did Good Morning, like, wow, that's amazing. All minor chords and F sharp minor, and we always just think it was just all. Sorry, attitude. There's so much to find out through isolated tracks.
Isolated tracks can muddy the waters somewhat, in that now that AI is capable of pulling apart components on a single track,
Yeah.
if that is the way it's presented, then that kind of undoes who played what simultaneously on a track. So sometimes it's better to go back to the older, say, the rock band stems, isolated tracks, to get an idea of, because that's more likely to have the unseparated components.
Yeah, that's true.
So we are in an age where it becomes a little more difficult to tell what went down on what track.
Yeah, you have to listen to lots of different things. Like I was working on Paperback Writer recently, and I thought, oh, this could sound good with a tuned down guitar. You play an A, and it's like, oh, and it sounded like, oh, I think he did it like that. It sounds great. And I was doing a video of it, but I thought, I haven't listened to it. I'll go find any other tracks. And I found one where they actually had Paul playing the guitar during the Paperback Writer. And then I found out that I listened to that. Writer, paperback. My theory didn't work because you can hear him, his finger going off before it goes to this D7 to get to the G chord, his finger flicks, does that. I go, oh no, it's a sure sign. So he's playing in normal tuning. So it ruined my whole theory. So yeah, sometimes the theory's great. You can go with it and try it out in different songs and you think you got it right. Yeah. And it's like, and then you hear another track and you hear, oh, what's happening there? And the audio clue tells you, to me anyway, I hear that sort of thing. I hear that when you bump a string or something like that. Yeah, it's a clue to telling you that, I got it wrong.
It's the simple thing that's right.
Yes.
I remember hearing a bootleg of Paperback Writer and hearing those ghost chords that they used as guide chords for the harmonies at the beginning.
Yes, I'm saying that's what I'm just doing now.
Yeah, those are those chords.
Yeah.
But what that made me realise is that's how they constructed the harmony. So the first chord, that is a harmony that suits that chord, and then they just hang on to that to the end of the whole thing. The second harmony they bring in suits the second chord, and then they hold that, and then the third chord, and so on. So they basically are holding 4 different chords to the end of that whole passage, which is how you end up with all these incredible, not clashing, but overlaying notes that belong to a whole lot of separate chords. It's because they were all to those separate chords. So figuring out that that's how they can, that was really mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, because when I was doing my theory, I hadn't heard those ones, and my theory worked perfectly. But hearing those... Oh, no.
Yes.
Because I tried to do it with the other channel, and it's like didn't make sense. Like, why would you do that? 2 notes going.
Well, here's a theory. There's 2 guitars on that song, right? There were 2 guitars played on the basic track. My theory in that case would be whoever it was doing the second guitar, I think it was John.
Yes.
Would be the one playing those ghost chords. Then Paul just comes crashing in with that riff, and he's ready to go with that riff. He doesn't have to jump from the D7.
All George does, he doubles up on it. Paperback Writer on a paperback writer before the paperback writer. Just after, like he doubles up. It's even written down. That's what he does. That's all he does. Like do you
think it's feasible that he may have played the ghost chords as well?
No, that's John doing vibrato. That's what John does. When I get to the paperback, sometimes Paul forgets to do the riff, like paperback writer, paperback writer. He does that the second time. Paperback writer. So George is doing the paperback writer, and it's written down. Basically, that's what he does. I think he might have played tambourine, maybe in the basic track. I'm not sure.
We can revisit that one.
Yeah.
They practiced that song with George on bass and then recorded it with him on tambourine.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think the thing is that a lot of people think this is train spotting. It's just going too deep. It's whatever.
That one is the Beatles.
But for me, the Beatles, I'm a second-gen fan, so, I've been with them a long time, and I've been very obsessed with them for a long time, and I've loved them for a long time. But the thing that remains for me is intrigue. I find the music and how they managed to create something so lasting, I find that incredibly intriguing. How did they create something so lasting? And I'm still unpicking that. And for me, the who played what kind of stuff is not just train spotting. It's about trying to unpack the magic and just the components of that magic. It's a very satisfying thing for me as a Beatles fan, a lot more satisfying than the more gossipy stuff that surrounds their story.
Yeah, I don't know anything about birthdays or whatever. I try to read tuning, but I just get past, about 5 pages in.
Oh, I loved it. Loved it.
I know, but I just, my span of attention is minute. I just get bored very quickly.
Well, the beauty is, as both of you guys have pointed out, anytime there's something after all these years, there's something new to learn and to hear it and see it in a different way, that's wonderful. It doesn't get any better. The intrigue keeps going.
I love to have a book on how they made Dear Prudence, for example. Like, it's just so laid, and it's just how the stages of it. Well, when was the drums put in and how they do it? Because why the bass track changes and just the whole construction of that song. It's just such a great song. And the way it's arranged, it's magic. I can't imagine any better.
Oh, yeah. I've always esteemed that song very highly. But after hearing you guys discuss it today, it's like I am manifestly more impressed with the achievement that represents.
Yeah.
How that whole thing was just orchestrated. It meshes so much grander than the sum of its parts. It's just amazing.
When I think of Dear Prudence, and it's been like a relatively recent realisation, I mean, Led Zeppelin were huge for me as a kid too. And certainly in my approach as a musician and as a guitar orchestrator, I love doing that stuff. Jimmy Page and the work he did on orchestrating parts was very, very important to me and still is in the music that I make. And Dear Prudence, to me, it almost starts that off. I know that may be overstating it, but that idea of building up an orchestra of guitars and building and laying and increasing, I don't really hear precedent for that before that song particularly. I think it's actually, in terms of the whole approach of using 8 tracks, because that was the beginning of their 8-track experience, using those 8 tracks to create a guitar orchestration, I think it was actually hugely influential, and I think the song was really quite underrated from that arrangement perspective. I think it's a very important song.
Yeah, I was always surprised how many guitars I could find. And it's even interesting things like one of the guitars plays A chord at the end. Like it's a D, but sort of I can't do it. Yeah. But it's a... So one guitar, it goes... ends on plays on A while the other things do. So it's one of those things you find.
I hope people go and find your recreation of it on YouTube. It's quite something.
Yeah, I was proud of that one. And it proves why it's not an octave device used for the guitar at the end, because they play slightly different things sometimes.
It's some of George's coolest playing, some of his coolest fills.
I think it's his genius.
Oh, just so much. He really went up another level on the White Album. And then Abbey Road, my goodness, his playing on that album is just exemplary.
When he gets to do it on John's song, he's got more freedom to do, for Dear Prudence. Like, I don't know whether he'd have that much freedom to do it on a Paul song.
And yet he contributes such exquisite parts to You Never Give Me Your Money. She came in through the bathroom window. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Oh, his guitar work on Abbey Road is insane. Yeah.
And George name-checked those 2 songs as 2 of his very favourites off Abbey Road. So he's praising Paul, which is a really nice thing to say.
Yeah.
I'd read quotes where he really had a distaste for that Rosewood Telly, but his soloing on the rooftop is just absolutely magnificent.
The mystery is how he went from that wah-wah crazy, annoying...
Wah-wah Leslie.
Listen to the outtakes, get rid of that wah, please, man. It's not even rhythmic. It's this sort of really wah-wah. To get from that stage of, even the day before the rooftop, doing Dig a Pony, then suddenly on the roof, it's like, what? He must have gone home. He's like, I've gone home, I'm going to work on his songs. And he just, it was like, what? The difference is, like, the thing when the light's on, when it all happens, they can be mucking around. It sounds awful. You listen to hours and hours of the same song and it's just not getting anywhere. It's just, it gets out of tune. And suddenly, when the light's on or whatever, or when they're on the roof, it's suddenly, what?
That switch is flipped.
It's a totally different band. And it's perfect. George's solo is just incredible.
That wah-wah bit reminds me very much of the Cheech and Chong song called Black Lassie, where it's a very funny piece where Coral, stop that wah-wah. And eventually the wah-wah gets yanked off Carl and Carl. That's what it feels like.
First time I've heard somebody bring up that song in 50 years.
What song is that?
Black Lassie.
Yeah.
It is hilarious. It's a great parody, But One After 909, now I think we would probably be agreed it's not the greatest song. It's a great performance, but one of the things that makes an incredible performance is George's lead playing on it. Now, for somebody who really struggled to jam and struggled to just pull fantastic things out of the air, boy, does he do it on that song. To me, that is his hottest blues rock licks. It's incredible, particularly in the second verse. There are just some really fantastic licks in there. I don't know how he did that. I don't know if he went home and practiced fervently for a couple of nights to make sure he got it right, but it feels more spontaneous than that. So I guess that just shows that when they had to, they could pull the magic together and they could just play well together. When they had to, they could just do it. Maybe when they were just stuffing around in the studio for hours getting filmed, they weren't going to be that great, but they always eventually brought it and eventually produced something that was wonderful. They just did. But George, wow, he did a great job.
Yeah. I think it was what Paul intuited, is give them a challenge and they'll rise to the occasion.
Yes.
A completely unreasonable challenge put before them.
Absolutely.
But boy, did they pull it off.
Yeah.
Well, they produced 3 number ones during that session. That's more than most bands would achieve in 20 days.
Right.
Yeah, and they go from stage to like 2 of us, whereas guitar kind of 2 of us, and to the acoustic. I think John might have suggested try it on acoustic.
Do you think that initial run at 2 of us inspired Ringo's drumming for Get Back?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, it sounds exactly like it.
Yeah. Apparently, it's just on film, even if it's not in the finished cut of Get Back, because when Gary Astridge was on the show, he had made reference to Ringo reaching out to Peter Jackson. How did I come up with that drum part? Oh, we've got it. We'll find it. We'll send it to you. And so we haven't seen that footage, but apparently Ringo has.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it was. Ringo, what you're doing on 2 of us, why don't you put it here?
Yeah, it's a magic feel, like how you can make a marching feel, like only Ringo could do it. And I've been told that it's kind of idiosyncratic to play that thing. If people try to copy the marching thing, they can't do it because Ringo's quirkiness, he does some ghost note or something like that. So it's a total feel.
Just as remarkable as all that is, if I listen to the verses of While My Guitar Gently Weeps or something and listen to the absolute minimum bass drum snare that he's doing, not even a hi-hat, not a cymbal in sight, nothing. It's just the sparsest thing you could possibly think of. And it works absolutely perfectly because of what's around it. The whole less is more stuff is so underplayed, I think.
They were locked in.
Yeah, Ringo just seems to lock in completely all the time, really. It's like a drum machine. He's just there, and he keeps it simple. And it has to be encouraged by Paul. Play some toms, like boom, 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 boom. So Paul has great ideas for drummer. I mean, he's saying, "Don't let me down." The ride cymbal, do the on the ride cymbal, sort of thing. Like, yeah, he's great. He's great things for songs, arrangements, but Ringo can think of things himself as well.
Still has to execute them.
Yeah, he can play it. Paul can't really execute. He does the Ringo type boom, 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 boom rolls and stuff like that. And we think he plays the drums on "Don't Pass Me By."
Paul plays the drums on that.
Yeah, it's lots of drums. There's more overdubbed drums, and it's all like going through it. It's just because Ringo's playing the keyboards.
It's the sloppiest drum performance in their whole repertoire, that song.
Yeah. Sounds great. Sounds fantastic. I love it, though.
I know we've moved on to another one now. Sorry, Robert.
Something About the Beatles, created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez, executive producer Rick Way, title song performed by the Corgis. Something About the Beatles is an evergreen podcast.
Now I want everybody to listen while Carl plays with his wah-wah. Carl and his wah-wah. Thank you very much, Carl. That's just fine. You can stop now, Carl. Carl, you can stop now. Give me that wah-wah, Carl. Don't you ever try to play while I'm singing about a great American dog. Black Lassie.